I'm here with Nigel Munt from Aussie Injury Lawyers. Hi Nigel,
Hello,
how are you going?
Eva. I'm really well, thanks.
Yeah. You were a lawyer. Have you been a lawyer for a long time?
I've been a lawyer for about 30 years now, Eva, and what our company does mainly is total permanent disability claims through people's superannuation.
Which is also known as TPD, isn't it?
It is indeed, yes.
Yeah.
And I've always thought of it as a fairly misleading sort of a term because if you think about it, the term total permanent disability, it sounds so dire and so catastrophic. And so I think what happens is that a lot of people who would otherwise engage with the process sort of take the view that it wouldn't apply to them or that they wouldn't be bad enough to actually make a successful claim.
So how does it work then?
So basically the total permanent disability or total permanent disablement insurance is contained in your superannuation. And what I find amazing is that most of the clients that we act for aren't even aware that they have that insurance cover. So basically somebody will be forced out of work, whether it's an injury, a brain injury, cancer, mental health issues, and they can no longer continue in their role. When they're forced out of work, typically they will go to Centrelink and not realise that in the superannuation there is actually insurance to cover them if they can't continue working. And so what we do is we run a series, and basically it's an education process where we bring people's awareness that they have the insurance and I suppose look at trying to help them get the benefit of the insurance. The way that it works is that if you're successful, the insurance component in your superannuation is paid into your super fund. So, for example, if somebody had $50,000 in their super fund and they had a $200,000 insurance component, after the claim is successfully completed, the $200,000 insurance money would go into their super, so they'd have $250,000 in super. And because they have been established as TPD, they're able to access it immediately, irrespective of the particular age and circumstances.
Well, I could imagine that would help lots of people who all of a sudden can't earn money anymore.
Absolutely.
So at least if they're able to access it immediately, then they'll be able to use it to support themselves.
Yeah, that's right. And what happens is that a lot of people, as I said, we meet people all the time, and there's one particular case that I remember where we met a lady who had been about 7 years out of work and receiving the disability support pension. And when I met her, we spoke to her and said, you know, do you know about your TPD insurance? Did you do anything about that? And she had absolutely no idea that she even had that cover. And then what we were able to do is to make a claim for her, and it turned out that she wasn't aware that she had insurance in her super of about $800,000.
Wow, 800.
Yeah, so, you know, really life-changing stuff. And so in her circumstance, she was able to remain on the disability support pension, and the $800,000 was paid into her super fund. Then with the assistance of a financial planner, she's able to draw down on that money in a way that preserves her situation with her Centrelink benefits. It doesn't affect that, so that her quality of life, whilst still struggling with the condition that she unfortunately had, is a lot better. You know, it takes that whole financial uncertainty for her out of the equation, which was a very rewarding thing to be involved with.
Absolutely. This is community service on a whole different level. If somebody's injury didn't happen at work, like say they got cancer or something like that, will they still be able to claim TPD?
Absolutely. The interesting thing about it is that people, I think, tend to get confused between an accident happening at work and TPD, because people who have an accident at work would have their typical work accident rights, whether they can make a claim on work cover or iCare or so forth. But with a TPD claim, that's completely independent of that work cover claim. So TPD is pretty much however your cause. The cause of the injury or blame or fault doesn't really play into it. It's simply whether you meet the criteria to qualify for being TPD.
If somebody was had a compensation claim for a car accident or a work cover accident or something like that, can TPD be claimed on top of that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens is that people, that's where a lot of the confusion can come in, because people will think that because they have to start their motor vehicle accident claim or their work cover claim within 3 years, everybody talks about the 3-year rule. TPD is very different, and in fact we can basically go back to a time when the person had to cease work because of their injury and look at the situation of their insurance at that time. So it's not uncommon to go back as far as 20 years and find that somebody has been forced out of work because of an illness or an injury, and then we find out what their insurance cover was then, and that's the relevant time. So there's no time limit as such. It's just about what level of what their insured position was when they had to cease working.
So Nigel, what happens if I don't have a superannuation, or if my account's closed? What happens then?
That's an excellent question. One of the very common situations that we find is that somebody has an accident and they stop working and they go on to Centrelink. They then make no contributions to their superannuation, and that can happen over a number of years. They then find out about the possibility of a TPD claim and inquire with their super fund, do I have any insurance? And that's a very, it can be a little bit misleading, because their super fund is basically shut down. They've made no contributions to the insurance for a number of years, but the relevant time is when they stopped working. So quite often we'll have clients that will contact us who believe they don't have insurance cover because their fund's closed or they haven't made any contributions for a long time. But again, it goes back to when they stopped working and the insured position then. So people need to be careful to make sure that when they're checking with their super fund about their status, they're asking at the very right time rather than what it may be now.
Yeah, well, it's really testament to our system in a way, isn't it? That this is available to people.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's made a huge difference to so many people, and I think the situation is that it really pays to get some expert advice on the topic, because there is so much potentially at stake. And I think people sometimes, when they've been through a terrible ordeal in their life, and they just feel like they've had nothing but bad luck, I think it's sort of hard to accept that something good might actually come of it, financially at least. And so it's definitely worth making those inquiries to find out exactly where you stand.
Well, it could help people out so much, couldn't it? I can just imagine what it's like. I mean, I know what it's like not to be able to earn money anymore, and to be able to be given this almost golden handshake in a way. Here you go. This is for your suffering, and here, have some ease.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the typical client that we're dealing with has had a life-altering condition, brain injury, cancer, mental health issues, all of those things completely change their day-to-day life. And so at a time when people are really dealing with a complete upheaval in their life, obviously the money isn't going to fix their problem, but if we can at least alleviate one part of the future stresses that they're going to have, and sort of let's take the financial side off the table, it definitely can help the holistic outlook for that person moving forward.
So on that point, you were talking about people who have cancer, or people who have a brain injury, or people who have a condition. If somebody is on the disability support pension, can they still make a claim?
Absolutely. In fact, I would say that probably a very high proportion of clients that we meet have been on the disability support pension, or have applied and been rejected from it because it's not easy often to get approved for the DSP. But quite often the clients that we're dealing with are ones that have been on disability support for some time and didn't realise what their rights and options were. And again, we go back and we can manage it in a way between them and a financial planner, for example, where they can maintain their status of a disability support recipient and still improve their day-to-day living having this money behind them.
Right, so if somebody gets this huge lump of money from their TPD claim, will they lose some of it to tax, or will their Centrelink benefits stop after receiving it?
There is, it's a little bit involved with respect to the way that it works, but the tax is not on the money going from the insurance into the super. Any tax would be on withdrawals. And again, that's very much an area for a financial planner to guide them, but in a nutshell, you can't be worse off for having more in your super.
Is it worth doing a claim once legal fees are paid?
Yeah, look, typically, but the good thing about a TPD claim is you know exactly what you're going for before you start. And the way that we arrange our fees with our clients is that our view is that, you know, if your claim is done very quickly and very simply, that should be to your benefit, not ours. So in other words, you should really only pay for what you need. But obviously that cuts the other way when somebody has a claim and the superannuation company the insurance company are particularly difficult about approving someone's claim. So the way that we've tackled that is that we cap our fees up front. So we would say to somebody, this is exactly what we're going for. We'll keep track of everything that we do and you'll only be charged for what we actually do. But if it gets way out of control and it's way more involved than we anticipate, we'll put a cap on it to say no matter how much work we have to do, your fees won't exceed this level. So it gives you the certainty going into it that it's not all going to get eaten up in legal fees if the insurance company take a very difficult view and really drag it out on us.
Yeah, I can imagine that happening.
Oh, it does happen occasionally.
I can imagine that happening. So what happens if somebody goes back to work in the future? Will their TPD still be salient, or will they still have it available?
That's an excellent question. So basically, when you're making a TPD claim, it's on the basis that you can't return to your employment, that you've lost your career basically. Now there are lots and lots of people who after a TPD claim re-enter the workforce, whether it's in a different role, a modified role, or go back to something very similar to what they were doing. There's no prohibition on doing that. It's not as if you're not allowed to go back and work again, you absolutely are.
So what happens if somebody's only got psychological injuries?
Well, there's that's a question that we're often asked is, you know, my injury is purely psychological, can I still claim? And the answer is absolutely yes. The test really is whether you're able to do your job moving forward, and it really comes down to being supported by your medical team, which is probably the most crucial part of all of these sort of claims, is that we can get your medical team or find people that are appropriately qualified to support our argument that the injuries or the condition that you suffer from is sufficiently serious enough and going to preclude you from returning to work.
So can you tell me what people should do if they want to head down the track of TPD?
Yeah, look, I think the important thing is that if people find themselves in a situation where they're unable to return to work, and then they should definitely seek expert opinion. We'd obviously like to help as many people as we can to establish whether they're likely to have a successful claim. So if they get in touch with us at Aussie Injury Lawyers and find out, the process initially is that we do what we call a cover confirmation. So before anything is sort of locked down or any big decisions are made, we're able to ascertain exactly what we would be going for if they chose to do the claim. We know exactly what their prospects would be based on the history and the information they've given us, and then they can choose to go ahead and exercise those rights and make a claim, and we're very happy to support them all the way.
If in a situation, which is something that happens a lot with people who acquire brain injuries, say a carpenter acquires a brain injury or becomes paralysed, breaks his spine or something like that, if he's capable of doing a desk job, does TPD still come into this?
Yeah, That's a very interesting one, because one of the things that we look at when we're ascertaining a claim is the training and experience of the person. Most of the super funds TPD is determined by being unable to return to the work that you're trained or experienced in. Now it can get a little bit confusing, but basically if I'm a carpenter or a boiler maker and that's all I've ever done, and I have a brain injury or I have some other sort of condition that prevents me from doing that, the superannuation company can't simply say, go and become a bookkeeper, go and do something else if you're not trained or experienced in those other roles. Because otherwise what would happen is every time a claim was lodged for somebody who had a physically demanding type of job and job history, it'd be thrown up, or you can go and do something sedentary. But if you don't have training or experience in something sedentary, then they can't use that against you when the claim's made.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming,
you.
Nigel. It's been wonderful to talk to you and to hear all these really, really, really helpful hints and tips that people can do to access their TPD.
Thanks very much, Eva.
Thanks, Nigel.